The Mistborn series is one of the most popular fantasy series out there, and it's unique in the fact that instead of being one continuous series, there's a 500 or so year gap in between the first half of the series and the second half of the series. And I don't know, maybe people just aren't talking about Mistborn Era 2 as much, but in general, it seems like a lot of people just read the original trilogy and don't continue into Era 2. Because of that, I wanted to discuss today some of the differences between Mistborn Era 1 and Mistborn Era 2. I am gonna focus this video on specifically Era 1 versus the Alloy of Law. 1, Era 2 isn't done, and 2, because Alloy of Law is the entry into Era 2. The setting and genre of Mistborn Era 1 is very obviously a high fantasy world. However, Alloy of Law and Mistborn Era 2 take place in a time further into the future and are no longer in a high fantasy world, and instead the world has become more industrialized, and the books also have kind of a Wild West feel to them as well. So if we're getting down into the nitty gritty, they're no longer high fantasy, they're now more historical fantasy. 500 or so years have passed, and the characters from Mistborn Era 1 have now become legend. Very similar to how Kelsier became legend after his death and became the Survivor, Vin and many of the other characters have their own hero legendary nicknames. Obviously with the time jump, there's going to be new characters, but if you like how Brandon Sanderson writes characters in general, you're going to like the characters in Mistborn Era 2. In fact, I think some of the characters in Mistborn Era 2 are more interesting and stronger than some of the characters in Mistborn Era 1. Specifically, there's a stronger female presence in Mistborn Era 2. Instead of Vin kind of being the one female, there's now several women who take up a lot of page space, and they're all really cool characters. Mistborn Era 2 comes in with a familiarity to the magic. However, things have changed in the past 500 years. For example, there are some new elementic metals that have been discovered. Mistborn are a thing of the past, however, we now have twin-born Mistings who can use an ability from Allomancy and an ability from Feruchemy. These changes, though subtle, have a big impact on the world and bring a lot of that discovery back into Mistborn Era 2 that existed in Mistborn Era 1. The world hasn't changed since the end of Mistborn Era 1, not in any big way. The main difference is the time period and the changes that have come with that. I personally really enjoyed seeing the Mistborn world from a different time period, but I know that some people get really into high fantasy, so if you're not into historical fantasy, this one might not be for you. But personally, I think if you like the Mistborn world, you probably are going to like it in a different time period just as much. While Era 1 has a more slow burn epic feel to it, Era 2 is a lot quicker. Era 2 doesn't take as much time to set up the magic or the world, and the plot gets moving quick. While Era 1 had a much larger the world is at stake plot, Era 2 has a much smaller, more intimate plot. One of the major plot devices that Mistborn Era 1 utilized was the magic. In Mistborn Era 2, it takes a little bit more of a setting role and a little bit less of a plot role. However, it's obviously still integral to the story. It just doesn't take up as many of the major plot points as Mistborn Era 1 did. If Mistborn Era 2 sounds like something you might like, click the card for another historical fantasy. And I'll see you guys in the next adventure. Thanks for watching.